David Davis, former Brexit Secretary, who is the Conservative MP for Halton, Price and Howden, is with us now. Hello to you, Mr Davis. Great to talk to you. You're one of the rebels. Are you going to win?
Well, I think so. Certainly, if all those who want to vote for us are allowed to, we will win. I'm pretty confident we'll win whatever the whips try and do, if the amendment is called, of course.
You've changed your tune, though, haven't you? Because you didn't used to agree with the 0.7% GDP. I've got a quote from you here. Well, I don't actually agree with the government. This is in 2012. The government's policy on the 0.7%, I think that is just nonsense. We should spend the money on aid that needs to be spent on aid. Why have you changed your mind?
Well, what I said at the time, and you're quite right, as a Public Accounts Committee chairman, I said this is too fast an increase. It would lead to inefficiencies. But what we're looking at today is cuts that will be massive cuts in provision of clean water. Dirty water kills more children than probably anything else in the world, other than malaria maybe. We're seeing massive cuts to food support. About 250,000 people, 250,000 people will be facing starvation without that. What we're talking about, and big cuts to the biggest emergency areas in the world. One of your speakers earlier talked about the reduction to Yemen, the biggest emergency that the world has. All of these things will lead to loss of life. Probably tens of thousands of children will die as a result of these cuts. Nobody else amongst the G7 is doing this. Germany now is caught up and is at 0.7%. France will pass that this year as well. The Americans are increasing their spending by 16 billion a year. All of them face similar economic issues to us. We've actually got the fastest economic recovery rate in the modern world. And as a result, why are we doing this thing which will lead to the deaths of large numbers of children?
But Rishi Sunak would say in response to that the economic outlook is still uncertain at this stage. We can't afford it when we can. It's only temporary. When we can afford it again, then, of course, we'll put it back to 0.7%. And it does look as though the public agrees. 60% of the public, when they were asked, said, yep, charity starts at home.
Well, it depends how you put the question to them. If you tell them the consequence will be tens of thousands of children will die, I think you'll get a rather different answer. If you say, oh, should we spend on something at home first? Of course, you'll get that answer. The simple truth is that this is not necessary. It's less than 1% of the borrowings that Rishi's going in for this year. And as a result, it doesn't make economic sense. And as you've heard from Lisa Nandy and others, it will undermine our position, a very, very hard-won position with so-called soft power, our respect in the world, if you like. It will undermine that too. But for me, the issue is about lives, children's lives. And frankly, even if it was an unpopular policy, I would still stand up for it. I don't want to be a member of a government or a supporter of a government that is effectively deciding to lead to tens of thousands of deaths of small children.
And it does appear that many backbenchers agree with you. I think 45 need to vote against the government or in favour of the amendment in order to change the direction of this UK foreign aid. To that end, I believe that the Chancellor's been ringing people over the weekend, MPs personally, to ask whether they will change their minds. Did he contact you?
No, he didn't. He probably realised it would be a futile exercise. But that tells you that we are in winning territory, because the Chancellor doesn't spend his weekend calling out backbenchers normally, and we are in winning territory. If this is put to the vote, I believe we'll win, and the government will have to change its policy, and that will save lives.
Yeah, embarrassing for the Prime Minister to potentially lose a vote in his own House of Commons ahead of the G7. He's going to have a bloody nose, isn't he, heading down to Cornwall?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry about that, but I really don't want to see him embarrassed. Nobody does, actually, when we are hosting the G7. But the simple truth is that this should have been brought to the House. So this was in our manifesto, the 0.7%. We were the leaders in the world doing it, and it should have, if he wanted to change it, he should have brought it to the House of Commons and allowed the House to rule on it. I think actually he would have lost and we would still be at 0.7 today if he'd done that, which is why he didn't do it. And as a result, what he's got is a policy that one of the best directors of public prosecutions in modern times, Ken MacDonald, said is unlawful. So we've got an unlawful policy we need to put right. If he'd come to the House first, we would have corrected it at the beginning. Unfortunately, now we've got to do it when we can do it, which is today.
One of the other issues he's going to have to deal with, of course, is the dog's dinner that is the border in the Irish Sea. We heard from the President, you were Brexit Secretary, the present Brexit Minister saying, oh, it's harder than we anticipated it was going to be, despite three former Prime Minister as George Mitchell, the CBI, so many others explaining that. Let me just play this clip to you, if you'll indulge me, from the Government Minister this morning when I put that to her.
Lord Frost is absolutely trying to get it sorted, and he was in Ireland last week doing exactly that. It is very difficult on the ground in terms of trade, you know, it is important that we ensure that we do have trade between the UK and Ireland, between England and Ireland, and it is really important that we saw that, and Lord Frost is doing exactly that.
But you understand that it does look as though you underestimated the complexities of this agreement.
Well, as it has panned out on the ground, it is more difficult than we anticipated, and we do need to sort out that trade arrangement.
We're going to be paying the price for many years to come because our trade is affected. Imports and exports are affected. Northern Ireland is particularly affected. And I really hope the government can sort out some of these problems as quickly as possible because it's about jobs, it's about livelihoods, it's about the supply of food and everything else. It's got to be sorted out.
Mr Davis, to what extent do you accept responsibility for this mess?
Well, it was one of the things I resigned over, you may remember. I did predict to the Prime Minister at the time, when she conceded the so-called full alignment wording, that this was problematic, not what we promised, and would lead to difficulties in the future. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And as I say, that's why I resigned after that Chequers meeting a couple of years back.
Isn't that, I suppose, my question is, shouldn't you have stayed to try to sort it out?
It wasn't possible. Once you got to the point of agreeing the alignment of Northern Irish regulations with Southern Irish regulations, you are creating a border. Of one sort or another, you're creating a border which would end up falling in the Irish Sea. It would have been much simpler to create an invisible border between the north and the south of Ireland. That was the original policy. That's what Theresa May abandoned, I'm afraid. And that, as I say, in due course led to me resigning, which was the only way to bring it to an end, frankly, because as it was, her cabinet was determined to carry on with this policy, which would lead to where we are today. It will be resolved. It's difficult, but it will be resolved because everybody wants to resolve it. But it's an unnecessary difficulty, and it'll add a couple of years of negotiation to the overall outcome.
That was going to be my question. What is the resolution? How do you see it being resolved? Because, of course, in the wings, we've got the leader of the free world saying, unless you sort that out, forget a trade deal with the United States. Well, the secret goes way, way back. If you cast your mind back right at the beginning of the negotiations, both the Irish head of taxation, the head of their equivalent to the HMRC, and our head of HMRC said it was perfectly possible to manage with an invisible border between the north and the south under different arrangements. And similarly, with technical mechanisms, you can do the same here. Trusted trader arrangements, agreed regulatory arrangements, that sort of thing. It's possible to do it. It would just take a lot of detail. And it'll take, I'm guessing, frankly, because I'm no longer that close to the negotiation, but I think probably a couple of years of detailed onward negotiation to facilitate all of these things going backwards and forwards. It shouldn't have been necessary. It shouldn't have happened, but it happened because we conceded to an aggressive EU stance on this, when we shouldn't have done it. But it's not insoluble. It's practically resolvable, but it'll take a year or two. And you're pleased it's not you having to fix it?
No, I'm not pleased it's not me having to fix it. That isn't why I resigned. I resigned to make a point, to actually bring to crystallise, if you like, the problem. The outcome was the government changed, Boris came in, we got the outcome we got, which is slightly better than what was there before, and we will get a resolution eventually. That's worth a resignation, even my own.
David Davis, great to talk to you. Thanks for joining us this morning.